Let me read to you a passage from the Gospel of St. John, chapter 20, verses 1 to 2 and verses 11 to 18. It is the Gospel passage for the memorial of St. Mary Magdalene on July the 22nd. St. John writes, "Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, 'They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him.' But Mary stood outside the tomb weeping. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the feet. They asked her, 'Woman, why are you weeping?' 'They have taken my Lord away,' she said, 'and I don't know where they've put him.' At this she turned round and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. 'Woman,' he said, 'why are you weeping? Who is it you are looking for?' Thinking he was the gardener, she said, 'Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you've put him, and I will get him.' Jesus said to her, 'Mary.' She turned towards him and cried out in Hebrew, 'Rabboni,' which means teacher. Jesus said, 'Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet returned to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am returning to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God.' Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, 'I have seen the Lord.' And she told them that he had said these things to her." That's from John chapter 20, verses 1 to 2 and verses 11 to 18 for the feast day of St. Mary Magdalene. Let's think of Mary Magdalene for a moment. The fact that the Church celebrates during the liturgical year the memorial of Mary Magdalene proves that she attained an exceptional sanctity. She is counted among the Church's saints, and this shows that her love for Christ went far beyond that of being a mere acquaintance. Let us then consider her as she is represented and presented in the inspired writings of the Gospels. She is listed by St. Luke in chapter 8, verse 2, among the women who ministered to our Lord, his band, travelling as they engaged in their apostolic activity. Some of the women had been cured of evil spirits and illnesses, and Mary Magdalene is mentioned in particular as having been liberated by our Lord of 7 devils. What this entailed we are not told. From early times, some identified her with the woman who was a sinner and who anointed Jesus' feet in the house of Simon the Pharisee, but there is no basis for this in the Gospel account. Others have identified her with Mary, the sister of Martha, who anointed our Lord after he had raised Lazarus from the dead. Again, there is no basis for this in the Gospel account. In view of the common assumption that she had been a great sinner, I would observe that this too is not explicitly stated in the Gospels. Her having suffered from demonic possession does not prove it, because there are cases in the Gospels of people freed by Christ of possession by the devil without it being implied that they had been great sinners. A particularly serious case was that of the young boy whom Christ liberated from possession. Luke chapter 9, verse 38. Our Lord's disciples had been unable to cast out that devil. What does shine through in the Gospel account, especially in the account of today that I read earlier, is the magnitude of love Mary of Magdala had for Christ. It is evident that she was totally devoted to him and looked on him as the master of her life and her being. She ministered to him and to the 12 during the apostolic journeys of his public ministry and followed him to his death on Calvary. There she remained with Mary, his mother, and John, the beloved disciple, together with a few others, at the foot of the cross. She would have been very close to Mary, the mother of Christ. She was among the first to arrive at his tomb early on the Sunday morning after the Sabbath day of rest, and there she discovered the empty tomb. There she had the joyous encounter with the risen Jesus. She actually touched him. "Do not cling to me," he said. It was a privilege granted to the 12 in the evening of that first day, to actually touch our Lord. She heard him say that he was ascending to the Father, and she was the first to be asked by him to announce his resurrection. Undoubtedly, forever afterwards, she was an ardent witness in the infant church to the risen Jesus, a witness overflowing with love for him who is the living and unseen head of the church. Mary of Magdalene can be regarded as a representative par excellence of the lay members of Christ's faithful, subject to the guidance of the 12, but bringing to the church and to the world around her an altogether special witness to the reality of Christ the Lord. She was a witness in her own right to the resurrection, reminding us that simply by our baptism and confirmation, we are sent by Christ to announce him to the world especially that is around us. We do this, however, as members of the church led by the 12. Mary Magdalene is one of the earliest of the lay saints, so characteristic of the early church. It has often been pointed out that the triumph of the Christian church at the beginning of the 4th century in the Roman world was due in no small measure to the preceding centuries of witness by the lay faithful. Mary Magdalene embodies the lay saint on whom so much of the church's mission depends. All members of the church are called to be passionately in love with Jesus and fully participating in the mission of the church's body, which mission is to bring the knowledge and love of the risen Jesus to the world.